The topic for today of our session is reopening and re-engaging, enhancing learner engagement and interaction in the post-COVID classroom. And by the way, this presentation is brought to you by OKIO Labs, the amazing company behind the creator of the OKIOCAM T Plus and all the other OKIOCAM products. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. Honestly, before we dive in though, I'd like to go ahead and take a second to introduce myself. I know Nico shared a little bit about me, but my name is Sarah McCarthy, and I have been an educator for over 10 years in Orlando, Florida. And while I was a classroom teacher a few years ago, I started creating these math video lessons. Elementary math is my jam, mainly 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, but I have people begging me to expand a little bit. And this side business of creating videos turned into a full-time business for me right now. It's a platform that I created called McCarthy Math Academy, where I create videos and math songs and lessons, all kinds of engaging resources to make math fun, make it click, and make it stick for our fabulous students out there. Now, enough about me though. Let's go ahead and talk about you because, oh my goodness, y'all, this past year and a half has been crazy. And I want to take a second to here's a bunch of gratitude, all the hearts to you, because you had to endure this crazy, intense, extremely stressful year where everybody was thrown into this chaos, and it was a huge learning curve for everybody. Now, we know when we mentioned in the post-COVID classroom where it said on the topic page, we are completely aware that we are still feeling the global impacts of the virus and what it has done to we've had to adapt a lot, right? But it has provided us with opportunities to adapt to new challenges in education. So let's keep in mind as we're moving forward that I know that we're wondering, okay, it's been a year now. How can we move forward? Knowing what we know, being ready to be face-to-face or remote learning or even hybrid learning, whatever it may be, how can we be ready and prepared to engage and reopen our schools? So here is our agenda for today. We are going to talk about the 3 biggest challenges that we all faced last year, and then expose some solutions to make this year a little bit more manageable, more fun, more engaging. We will end with a Q&A portion so if you have any questions along the way, make sure that you are chatting them. Make sure that you're putting them in the chat room, and we will have the team collecting all the questions, and we'll provide time at the end to answer them. And Nico will be joining us again for that from OKIO Labs. And you all are going to love Nico because he is here with 5 OKIOCAM T Pluses to give away at the end of this. We're going to raffle it off. So be there for the fantastic wheel and see if you are the winner. Make sure you stay tuned until the end of the session today. So let's go ahead and jump on in, all right? Let's start with the first challenge that we were exposed to this year, and that was an inequitable learning experience for all. It really has been a challenge to maintain this exciting pace for our in-class learners and our remote learners, right? I mean, let's be real. As a teacher, we know that it's really challenging just to engage our classroom full of students when we're face-to-face. And we were thrown into a whole new territory, and we had to adapt. It was indeed a challenge. I know teachers were like, but we have some solutions for you. So let's see. How can we be intentional about bridging that divide on engagement? And the solution is we need to be intentional. You're going to hear me say that a lot throughout this lesson, be intentional. And you're probably like, okay, Sarah, be intentional, sure. But the truth is, I know as well as you do that as educators, we get super busy during our school year. We get caught up in just the wheel of things that sometimes we're just flying as we're making it up as we go, essentially. So we need to make sure that we are intentional about the activities that engage both kinds of learners. And by both kinds, I mean our face-to-face learners, if we're thinking face-to-face next year, our remote learners, if we're working with students at home, and if we happen to have that hybrid setting again, being ready with activities that will enhance the engagement for both settings. And to do that, we have to make sure that every learner is part of the learning environment. So let's think about how we could do that. I mentioned before that I am an elementary math teacher. I love math. I love bringing it to life as a teacher. And let's all imagine, just kind of ride with me here. Let's imagine that you are a third grade math teacher, okay? You might not be a third grade math teacher, but you're really good at pretending with me for a second. So pretend that you are a third grade math teacher and you are in your fraction unit. And fractions can be kind of scary for kids, and sometimes for teachers too, is what I've noticed in my experience, but that's okay. It's something that we have to teach as a third grade teacher, right? And let's say that we want our students to compare the fractions 2/4 and 2/6. Okay, that's essentially what we want them to be able to do. Now we have to be intentional about this activity. What are we going to do? Well, if we're not intentional about it, we might just say, okay, students, now I would like for you to compare 2/4 and 2/6, find out which one is greater or less, or are they equal? Are they equivalent fractions? And with this, you might have your students working on it, and you see you're walking around and your face-to-face learners are engaged, are working on it. You're looking, maybe if you're working with students who are working from home or remote, they are working, you can see because their cameras are on, and then you bring them back. And if we're not being intentional, we might just go over it and say, okay, now I'm going to do it, and I would like for you to follow along and see if you were correct. But who has the most responsibility of the learning if we do that? We do as the teachers, right? We are going to be the most engaged because we are the one working through the problem. We are the one thinking through the problem, and the kids are passive participants in it. We want to empower our students. We want them to be active. So how can we take it up a notch? Well, what we could do, I'm kind of imagining here that I'm teaching hybrid. That way I'm considering both settings here. And maybe I could release some of the responsibility and the thinking to some of the students, and they could share how they compared these two fractions, 2/4 and 2/6, verbally. And that's great. But if I have some of my face-to-face learners explaining, are my remote learners really going to be engaged, or are they kind of just sitting back, wondering what's going on and watching cartoons in the background, We want to make sure that they are engaged. So how can we take this up a notch? We could, if we have a document camera like the OKIOCAM in the classroom, we could have some of the students, go up to it and show their work and explain how they did it. And you could have your at-home learners, holding up their work. See, here's mine, and saying, here's what I did, Miss McCarthy. I had a number line and I broke it into parts, and I found out that 2/4 was greater. But it's in pencil and it's kind of hard to see, and kids are all over the place with holding it up, right? And as a teacher, you're kind of like, wait, what? All right. So my thought was, how can we turn that up a notch even more? How can we really put all of put the learning into the hands of the student? And here is what we could do. We could have them combine by showing their work and incorporating a program like Flipgrid. If you are familiar with Flipgrid, could you go ahead and type Flipgrid yes into the chat room, or Flipgrid kind of, like maybe you've heard about it, but you're not quite sure about it, or Flipgrid no if you've never heard about it. I'm going to briefly go over it, and if you have any questions about it at the end, feel free. But the cool thing is that Flipgrid is a free program. It's a platform that teachers can hand over activities. So for instance, if I were to virtually send the activity of comparing these two fractions, all of the students would receive this. And then students could use their webcam, their phone if they're at home, a tablet, whatever it might be, to explain their work and be able to show their work too. But we could take it up a notch even more if every student happened to be equipped with the OKIOCAM, one of the versions of the OKIOCAM, like the OKIOCAM T Plus that you see in the picture on the left. We see a student there working on it. And this would be really cool because it would kind of look like this. Let me show you. I'm going to put on my teacher hat, or my student hat, in just a second. Let me just switch over so you can see. Oop. Oh, maybe I'm not able to. I think that worked. Let me see. Okay, cool. And let me stop my share. Let's imagine that as a teacher, Are we good? Can you guys see? All right, I'm assuming that we can see there, that you all can see my screen. Okay, so let's imagine that now I'm the teacher and I have handed over the responsibility through Flipgrid to the students. And I've said, okay, students, I would love for you to go ahead and compare these two fractions. Well, the students can then use a document camera like the OKIOCAM to say, okay, Miss McCarthy, okay, so here's what I did. I had 2/4 and I had 2/6. And what I did was I took the two fractions. This is a whiteboard, by the way, by the OKIOCAM T+. And I made it two fractions. So this was my 2/4 right here. And right here was 2/6. I broke my first fraction into 4 equal parts. And I shaded in 2 of them. And then for the next one, I broke it into 6 equal parts because my denominator is 6. I'm put 3 on this side and 3 on this side because 3 + 3 = 6. And then I shaded in 2 parts for my numerator. And as you can see, based on my model, 2/4 is greater than 2/6. And then they can click to stop recording there. And this is a way that you can engage all of your learners. I'm sorry, I'm just switching back over to my camera. Okay, so that would be a way that you can engage all of your learners, right? Every learner then has control of this. And the cool thing about Flipgrid, using it with the OKIOCAM T+, is that students can interact with each other too and say, hey, that's really cool that you did it that way, and here is how I did it. So there are some ways there that we can engage our students. Now let's move on to challenge number 2, which is difficulties in facilitating collaboration. We all know that having students in 2 different settings pose a big problem, right, for collaboration. We love getting students to collaborate. It's so easy when we're face-to-face, but how can we do it if they happen to be in 2 separate learning environments? Well, what we need to do as a solution for that is to employ devices to promote collaboration. Again, we have to be intentional. We have to make sure that we are planning purposefully for this. And these devices can be in the form of activities, techniques, or even pieces of technology. Let's give you some examples, okay? How can we increase the collaboration between students? Well, first, I want you to consider what platform you might be using if you are teaching virtually, whether you're teaching strictly virtually or hybrid. You might want to consider some or even really face-to-face. You could even create breakout groups. And these could be groups that maybe you've gone over something whole group, maybe you've taught fractions whole group, and then you want your students to enter into a breakout group to collaborate together. So know what platform you have and understand how you can create those groups. Something else that another teacher did in Canada, which I thought was super cool, she is a science teacher in Canada, and she invented something called the Peer Pals system. And that is where she paired up one student from a face-to-face setting and one student from a virtual setting and had them have shared responsibility in their learning and accountability in their learning. For instance, maybe the student in the classroom was there to do the science experiment, while the one at home was recording the data and findings as they were watching the experiment. So both students were able to be engaged, which goes back to our first problem solution, and both students were collaborating there. You can see in the next picture over there, it says collaborative art activities. One of the cool things about the OKIOCAM is that you can totally create these stop motion films, and that can be a collaborative effort there. And I'm thinking too, I mentioned with Flipgrid before that students can collaborate. They can say, hey, this is how I solved mine. Let me show you how I did it. So whether what is really cool too that I want to mention about the OKIOCAM T+ or any of the OKIOCAM products is that it is a great alternative when we can't have students face-to-face. It's a great alternative it's the best case really to have students be able to collaborate because they can see each other's work. For math, they could be working side by side and showcasing their work, and that would provide a great opportunity for collaboration there. Okay, challenge number 3, problem in student assessment. Whew. How do we authentically and fairly assess our distance learners? Meaning, how do we know that they've got it? Right? Well, we have to make sure that we are intentional about facilitating scaffolding, or basically making sure that they've got it along the way. We know that we have all kinds of different learners in our classroom. We have some who are like Hermione Granger from Harry Potter, if you happen to know Harry Potter, who are total advocates for their education. They're asking questions when they don't understand. They're participating and eager to learn. And then you have students who are on the opposite side of the spectrum who have a hard time sharing. Maybe you have some shy students who don't really like speaking up for themselves, and whether they're on camera or not, they're just kind of uncomfortable about that. Who, when you say, hey, do you understand what we're talking about here? They'll just go, yeah. And then you see their test or their quiz score and you're like, oh my goodness, no, you did not understand. You didn't say that to them, but that's what you're thinking is like, oh, I should have been there to help you along the way. And that's really our jobs as educators, is to track the progress of our students and make sure we're checking in to make sure that they understand. So what do? We have to make sure that we are intentional about creating an environment where students can speak up, where they can communicate what kind of support they need. And we also could encourage after class support. So a good way to do this would be to make sure, well, hang on, let me back up a little bit. I'd love for you to go ahead and consider what you do to create that safe place in your classroom. You can chat that in the chat right now. What's something special that you do to create an intentional safe place for students to take charge of their learning, to ask questions? I know for me personally, I wanted to be intentional about this, and I created something called the Mathematical Mindset Creed. I use this when I'm teaching a lesson face-to-face, and I also use this Mathematical Mindset Creed in one of my newest programs, my video lesson series called McCarthy Math 155. At the beginning of every video, we do this creed, and it goes like this, and you'll be able to hear how it creates this space for students to feel safe about their learning. It goes like this. This is a safe place to make mistakes. Mistakes help me learn and grow. I am a hard worker. I stick with it until I get it. I am brave. I take charge of my learning. I ask questions when I don't understand. When in doubt, I draw it out, if possible, and it's always possible to work it out. I respect and actively listen to the ideas of others. We are ready to learn. That is something that we chant at the beginning of every lesson, and students go from this to feeling empowered, knowing that it's a safe place. And really the way that they know it is because throughout the lesson, we're constantly going back to that creed that they're saying. Now, this was a mathematical mindset creed, but it could be adapted to every lesson. And I know in one of the last sessions we did, people were like, oh my gosh, where is this creed? Well, it is in I know that Nico went ahead and put it up on their, on the booth. So you can definitely download it there. I've made sure that you can take it, adapt it, it's my gift to you. If you want to go ahead and use it, implement it, make it your own, okay? But also think about what you're doing. So I know some other teachers too, they like to check in with their students at the beginning of the year and foster this safe place by asking feeling-based questions versus the knowledge-based questions. Like, hey, if you were a color, what color would you be today? Or if you were a type of weather, what weather would you be today? Based on how you're feeling, not so much based on knowledge. Because how students are feeling, that if we can have them feeling confident, then they'll be more empowered to learn. Another thing too is, now you all are going to be like, okay, oh, well, hang on, let me back up. Another thing that I like to do, and that I know a lot of teachers do, especially when we had last year with the shutdowns of schools or even hybrid learning, was making sure that they were intentional about creating small groups. Because like I said before, some students are shy and it's hard for them to speak up in the class. Now, I know I was like that too. When I was in high school and learning geometry, my teacher, oh, well, hang on, let me back up. when I was learning geometry, I was struggling and I was afraid to raise my hand. I was actually a really shy student, even in high school, and I had a hard time advocating for my learning. That's why I'm very passionate about it now. And I wish that my teacher had created small groups for us to meet with her at the table or whatever. So I really suggest that a lot of teachers do this. And you can do this virtually too. And it's great. You can, if you have the OKIOCAM, it makes it really easy for the students and the teachers to engage. Also, I'm going to take it up a notch even more and say, what if we opened up the door to one-on-one support? I know, one-on-one, who has time for that, right? As teachers, that is the most precious thing in the world, is that we honestly, we don't have enough time. We wish that we had all the time in the world. But I'm going to be honest with you and let you know that, like I said in high school, I struggled with geometry. And my teacher recognized that a lot of us were struggling with geometry. And she said, if you all will come in the morning, 10 to 15 minutes before school starts, come with your questions and I'll help you understand a little bit more. I'll be here. And you better believe I took her up on that. And I showed up every day that I needed help. And I went from a C, which I was an honor roll student, pretty much principal's honor roll. I went from a C that I was very unhappy with to one of the highest grades in the class because she opened up that door. And I went from being totally confused to mastering geometry at that level. And I think to myself all the time, what would have happened if she hadn't opened up that door? Because my career now, what I love doing with my life is making math fun, making it click, and making it stick for others. So if she hadn't done that for me, would I be sitting here doing what I'm doing today? So just keep that in mind. I know that our time is stretched so thin. Believe me, I know. But believe me, I am also the product of somebody who opened up their door for just a smidge of time. So I truly, if you want to make sure that your students understand and want them to be empowered, make sure you're opening up that door for them as well. Okay? All right, so some final words. Again, I want to thank you guys and gals for all that you have done this year. You really have been thrown so many challenges, like a ton of bricks, basically. Yet, what I know is true about educators is that they are problem solvers, they are think outside the boxers, and they are do whatever it takesers. I am so proud of the people who rock the profession that I am, and I'm so proud of what I've seen across the nation of you all stepping it up. So I really, truly wish you the best year coming up. And if you have any questions, we're going to go ahead and get to them right now. So Nico, what kind of questions do we have?
Just wanna, I mean, they some of it are not questions, but I just want to highlight some of the comments and some of
Yeah.
the messages that we receive from our teachers. So a really good point that was raised by Janine was that I teach them to celebrate their mistakes and explain them to the class to help everyone else learn.
Yes.
I think it's really fundamental when it comes to learning of a kid to realize that most of the times you're gonna encounter mistakes, but what's important is you learn how to correct them. You want to make sure that you learn along the way, right? So I think it's really a good way of encouraging encouraging learning through recognizing your mistakes, right?
Absolutely. And you know what? That is so because for me, as I know I keep going back, but from my experience as a student, I did not feel like it was safe for me to make mistakes. I felt like I had to do things perfect. And if I didn't do things perfectly, I was failing. And it wasn't until my adult years that I was like, oh my gosh, there are so many beautiful things about your mistakes. And if you can shed it in that light, oh my goodness, if kids can get that at a young age, imagine what they will do with their lives. They'll be unafraid. They'll have courage to go out there and do what they were born to do.
And also along those lines, Katie was saying, I am not a classroom teacher anymore, but when I was teaching in LA, I encouraged students to find grammatical errors in any of my materials. They
Yeah.
used mistakes as warm-ups, and I maybe made some on purpose. It's really nice to make sure that, when it comes to learning and in the classroom, everyone's equal.
Yeah.
Teacher makes mistakes sometimes, your colleagues make mistakes sometimes, so it's really nice, a way of teaching and facilitating learning, when it comes to the kids.
Absolutely. And they see that. That is a huge teachable moment, is when you as a teacher make a mistake, to not just say, oh yeah, I knew that. I was just trying to see if you were paying attention. Half the time, I make mistakes all the time. I make mistakes sometimes in my videos and people call me out. And you know what I do? I give them a shout out. I'm like, oh my gosh, you are so right. And I'm so glad that you pointed that out. And I get excited about it. So then they will feed off of you. You all know that as educators, how you handle a situation is how they'll adapt to that as well.
Okay, so I just want to answer Erin's question. So, Erin Wickland, if you're interested in getting Sarah McCarthy's math grid, it's on the Okio Labs. It's on the Okio Labs e-booth on our exhibit. It's on the resources section. So it's on the bottom. You can go ahead and check it out there. If you have troubles finding it, just send me a message and I'll send it to you.
Absolutely. Very cool.
One last thing I want to point out, so we can go to the most fun part. One of the best things that, and this is from Katie, one of the best things that came out of this year was students being able to see their teachers as learners as well.
Yes, Katie, I love that. That is so true. That is so true. We were all, and yes to that. I don't really have anything to say. She nailed it there. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, one last thing I want to address this because I think this is a good question from Kenneth. In a hybrid setting, what would you say be the top two ways to ensure engagement, both virtual and in class? I find it very hard to engage both when I can move about in the classroom while also needing to look at two different environments.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So for me, honestly, I use a lot of movement, and I know it's kind of hard to be in one place because when you're teaching hybrid, you have to be in one location, because if you're coming over here to help, Nico out with his work, you're off screen. But I incorporate a lot of movement, and I would just try, since you know that it's hard to be in both places at once, those breakout groups, where either students are collaborating or you're meeting in smaller groups, while it's just a matter of how you're organizing your day. So not necessarily being whole group all day, which I love whole group. I love whole group. I love the energy of whole group. But for me, I would have to make sure that I was setting up small groups to meet everybody and make sure I was constantly checking in with them.
Thank you, guys. I hope we see you in the future session. So I hope you have a great day at Eastie. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, guys.